This is Inspirational Women, a weekly series shining the spotlight on female trailblazers making a true difference in our community. Once again, here is Kate Daniels.
Anna Hebra Flaster came to the U.S. as a young girl, a refugee. Anna is a gifted storyteller who, with her memoir, Property of the Revolution, From a Cuban Barrio to a New Hampshire Mill Town, gives us an incredible view into life for a child and for the adults of what it means to feel compelled to leave a homeland and to make a new life. Anna Hebra Flaster, good morning and welcome.
Hi, Kate.
I consider this a gift to have you join us this morning to give us some insights into your memoir, Property of the Revolution, an amazing book. It's taken some time, some years, for it to finally get into our hands.
Thank you. It's been years and years in the making. Well, in a way, I've been writing it all my life. One of the first memories I have of coming here from Cuba is, my grandmother was very depressed, very sad. And she knew she'd never see her father or her brother again. And she came because she knew that we needed to be cared for while all the adults were working. And to make her happy, I would draw. I wasn't writing yet, I don't think. I would draw a map of the barrio, and she'd correct me. And she'd tell me where Pancha lived and where Antonio's bodega was. And it made her so happy. And once my mother came in, saw what was happening and said, Anita, maybe one day you'll write a book about this, about what happened to us.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in me somewhere in my consciousness.
Sure.
And I didn't remember that until well after I began writing. But then I realized that I had wanted to do it since I was little.
Yeah.
And coming from a family of storytellers, there were stories galore. And the viejos, the elders that I talk about, resurrected the barrio in Cuba every day in the house. They would talk about it, not in sad ways or angry ways, but always the best of the past.
Mm-hmm.
And it made them happy. And so I wanted to know more about that world that we had lost. And so I absorbed all of that. And that's where all the stories came from being told these stories from different points of view across the decades. But I began seriously to plan the story in 2009. I started and stopped. I just thought about how I would do it. But then in 2018, I went to a writer's conference that my son forced me to go to because he wanted me to write the book. And I won a little award based on the first few pages of the story that I had written. And I got a great reaction from a bunch of agents. And that gave me the courage to really begin. And the whole thing took a year and a half. I spent about 6 months working on structure, chapter by chapter, scene by scene, where the big moments were going to be, what I wanted the reader to get from each moment. And then I began to write it. And the writing only took about 6 to 8 months, I think. And then I sent it to 4 agents. 3 offered to represent the book. And I thought, this is going to be easy. And then I picked an agent, and they couldn't sell it through the regular mainstream publishing houses. And so I ended up at a very small hybrid publisher. Oh, and I had a book deal in the UK. A publisher in the UK said they were going to publish the book, and it fell through. So it's been a lot of up and down.
How amazing that would happen, really, because they were excited to have the book and then to have it fall through. But
yeah, and they said that the agents, I had 2 agents at the firm working on this, and they said that they were the longest letters from publishers where they pass, and they were full of praise, but then at the end they would always pass, and they couldn't understand it. So I think a memoir is a very hard thing to sell when you're not a famous person.
Okay, go along those lines. Maybe that's it, but I'm glad that finally you landed with She Writes Press.
She Writes Press,
Yeah. Great that they took this on because while you may not be, quote, that famous person, this story is so compelling. I just really needed to know what was going on. I wanted to know your family. There's something about it that just draws you in and makes you feel a part of it.
I am so happy to hear you say that. When you say makes you feel a part of it, I was talking to someone, it was an interview, and I realized, because everybody always asks me, well, what is the message of the book? And there are messages that I hope readers will take with them. Mm-hmm. But in the end, what I really want is to bring them into that house and to put them in that chair and be in that kitchen and listened to the stories and loved the stories the way I did, and loved the family that loved me, loved all of us, and feel that unique warmth that you find in a Cuban home and in an immigrant home. So what you're saying makes me feel like that happened to you when you read it.
It did, and that is because you have a way of being able to write and describe the scene, sitting in the basement for, was it Buena Noche?
Noche Buena, the other way.
Oh,
Noche Buena, good night, is what it means literally, but it's Christmas Eve. Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
And to be there and to really feel what the foods were and all the people that were gathered round, it just made me feel part of it, maybe in part because my extended family, we would get together on Christmas Eve and, there'd be a lot of us around the table. But so it was so festive, and the way, yes, I just really felt I was right there. And the descriptions that you use, your writing just is natural.
Yeah, thank you. We were talking about the radio at the beginning.
Yes.
And most writers I know do read their writing out loud before they finish a piece. And because I started writing for the radio, I always write with that in mind, with it being spoken. And I think that it makes a big difference to the reader. Mm-hmm. It feels like someone is telling you a story. My style, anyway. It's meant to be heard. And I don't know if you're like this, but when I read, I kind of hear what I'm reading.
Yes.
Does that happen to you?
Yes.
You almost hear the voice of the person. And sometimes it's very clear, depending on the writing. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad that you think that, because that is something I try to achieve. I consciously aim for that. I feel that it's more personal.
It definitely is personal. And what's also compelling is the larger story about being a refugee family, right?
Mm-hmm,
and moving to the U.S. in the 60s. There's just something about that grabs my attention. And maybe it's, these days, because there's just so much negative energy that goes on around it. It was like, we want to know more. We need to know more, for one.
I'm glad,
right?
Yeah. I'm glad you were saying that. When you live through it, you feel like it's obvious to everybody in the mainstream culture around you what you must have been through, right?
Right.
But over and over, I've heard from people who knew our family in New Hampshire that they had no idea. They had no idea that it was like this for people, for refugees. And there's a difference, right, between a refugee and an immigrant and a migrant. They're all immigrants, but they come in with through different paths and for different reasons. Generally, an immigrant comes by choice and wants to make a better life in a new country or study or whatever, but they're coming by choice. A refugee isn't. It's usually they're forced to leave. They cannot stay. They know they will not be able to go back, and they've lost a whole chunk of everything they loved and knew.
Yes.
And then a migrant generally comes and goes, and an immigrant can come and go generally. So that distinction, I think, is made really clear in the story without it coming right out and smacking the reader on the head with it. It shows what it means to lose everything abruptly, to be uprooted, to never be able to go back, and then what it takes to survive that. And so that's one of the, I hope, valuable things about the book, is that it should illuminate, like you said, I think you used that word, the experience, the refugee experience. It's a family that has just gone through what will be, in psychological or psychiatric terms, referred to as an intergenerational trauma, right?
Right.
And that's different from other immigrant paths and other immigrant experiences. And so you have here in this country people who may look completely assimilated, right, because now they've been here a few years, and the children are speaking flawless English, but in their homes, that's what's happening. Right. Those refugees from Afghanistan, from Syria, from Ukraine, and I hope soften hearts toward immigrants and especially toward refugees. Some of the people who are being deported right now are former Cuban political prisoners, and so they're being returned to certain prison cells. Certainly they will be behind bars, and they will be there for as long as the Communist Party wants them to be there. There's no due process. And so it's a blanket approach to solving immigration problems which exist and should be solved, but it's not an intelligent or thoughtful enough process for me to be comfortable with.
Yes.
And I think when a reader goes into the book, they'll see what the cost has been for those people and what they're fleeing.
Yes. I don't think I know I didn't have an understanding of that, which is why I do find Property of the Revolution so illuminating, because I think just in general, unless we decide to really focus on learning something, we just kind of take the overall view like, oh, yes, that happened. But there's real people, real lives. There's just, all the grit of life that's going on and the being uprooted. And yes, I mean, you take us into the barrio, which you left, and your parents having to leave everything. I mean, it was hard to imagine. They at the airport, when you finally were able to leave, they scrutinize everything to make sure you're not taking a single iota, not even pictures with you.
That's right. Yeah. Well, the problem was you didn't know what the rules were, because the rules could change depending on what soldier you were dealing with.
Yeah.
And my mother didn't, in the case of photos, my mother didn't want to risk that her photos would be taken from her most precious possessions, her photos of us when we were little, of her grandmother, and they made it hard. That was the point of keeping us overnight and interrogating us all night long. That was the point, and threatening people with having to stay. And in some cases, they did. They kept a family member and said that for whatever reason that family member couldn't leave, and then the family had to figure out whether the rest of them were going to go.
Yeah.
Or stay, and some stayed. And then maybe they never got out. Because one soldier decided that someone looked too young to not be of military age, for example, if it was an older man. And that happened to people who looked younger than their age, and nobody ever really knew what the military age was, but you couldn't leave the country if you were within military age.
And wasn't that kind of a dangerous thing also where your dad was concerned because he looked young?
He looked young, and there were two things that happened. One was that he looked young, and they thought that he was lying about his age and couldn't leave. And then the other thing was a bump. He had an irritated bump on his chin. And the medic, who was supposedly checking to make sure everybody was healthy, said that was leprosy, and therefore he couldn't go. My parents had already decided that if something like that happened, the parent who was able to leave would take us and then work on getting the other parent out somehow.
Right. And that's the part that having to leave, really being driven to leave, that in your sharing your mother's story, how, she was really hopeful for this great new revival regime in Cuba and fought the Batista regime to have Castro come into power, and then to have it just be so bleak, totally so opposite to what she had believed she was working for, right?
What all Cubans believed.
Yes.
They promised the restoration of the 1940 Democratic Constitution. That decade had been a success in Cuba, and there were peaceful transfers of power. It's a model, actually considered a model constitution for its liberal democratic principles. And that was the goal. It's still the goal. It's still what these activists are clamoring for and demanding, and then landing in jail for demanding it. Yeah, so she had risked her life to end one dictatorship. In the book, there's stories about ways that she tried to help the rebels, as fearless 17-year-olds often do, that she thought nothing could happen to her. Something terrible almost did happen to her. But finally the revolution triumphs, and it turns into a worse dictatorship, and one in which the economy tanks completely from day one. Before the embargo, before the Bay of Pigs, everything is in chaos and uncertainty and in tatters. Things disappear from the shelves. And then there are all the personal freedoms that they lost, that they used to have even during the Batista dictatorship, like being able to leave the country and return, which is a basic universal human right. I think it's in Article 13, which is the right to leave one's country and be able to return to it. And suddenly that was taken away. Now you need an exit visa, and Cuba became one of a handful of countries in the world that required that. So yeah, life in society, everything changed, turned upside down, and she couldn't believe it. And I remember she said once that it felt like she was being suffocated every day.
I can appreciate that would be the feeling of having poured so much of herself into it and really trusting. That was the thing, I think, having faith this was going to change, and to have it just turn 180 degrees was, yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, and what cost? It's really amazing to me, right? How the power of one individual, one charismatic leader, one Fidel Castro, one Mussolini, one Hitler, what one individual can do to all those millions of people caught in the spokes of his wheel, Yeah. Horrible.
And to have to wait, waiting years to be able to finally have that exit, and still at the airport to be just under such scrutiny. And do you remember being there that night?
Yes, I do. And I think I say in the book that I was taken to a blue room in the middle of the night because there was nothing to eat or drink. But I remember somebody giving me crackers in a blue room. And I brought it up to my cousin, who was older than I, and had a better memory of that night. He and my aunt and other cousin left 6 months before we did. Their exit papers arrived. You never knew if or when they were going to arrive. But he said, yes, there was a woman who would take kids, a woman who worked there, and had crackers, and she would give us crackers because she did the same thing to him. Mm-hmm. So there was a kind woman working at the airstrip and was doing that. And a child would remember that. A child who was hungry would remember that. And he said there was a bluish light in the room. And also, so to get out, you had to declare yourself an enemy of the revolution, right? You were a counter-revolutionary. You had to out yourself. And then you had to resign from your job. You couldn't work. Jobs were for revolutionaries. So my parents both lost their jobs and then waited and waited and waited. They still had their ration book, which is another new thing that came with the revolution, but they had no money. So they had to depend on family to help them, and sometimes they would sell things on the black market, but if they'd been caught, they would have been jailed. Because after the revolution, you couldn't sell anything on your own or profit from it. Case of my mother's student who was arrested with his father because they butchered their own calf to pay off debts. And they were both imprisoned because they profited from their private property.
It's those kinds of details that just are beyond comprehension as to all of your life that gets stolen by that government. And the people who will rally around it, and they live with more ease, or they have stuff. An easier life, yes. Whether it really is ease, I don't know.
Yeah, sure. The people in the political elites in Cuba today don't have to worry about brownouts and blackouts and not having electricity to run a fan over a kid that's covered in mosquito bites because they can't run the fan so the babies get covered in mosquito bites because the electricity is shut off, especially in the provinces because the country can't produce the amount of energy to meet the demand. In the homes of the political elites or the military, the higher-ups, they have generators if that were to happen, even if it were to happen, because some of the neighborhoods don't experience blackouts because somebody important lives there. And those people come and go. In 2013, Castro allowed for the first time since 1959 Cubans to leave. They could leave freely. The law apparently had changed, except in reality it hasn't changed. You still have to tell the government that you're going to go to the embassies and apply for tourist visas. You still have to report to the government. And certain people can't leave because education may be free, but then they sort of own you. And for instance, doctors, if the country needs doctors, they're not going to be able to leave. But yeah, the higher-ups have children running businesses in foreign countries that deal with tourism and profiting, and that's okay. And they come and go easily. They can afford to go to private schools in Switzerland, their children. They have yachts, and Cubans talk about this all the time, and they're outraged. And the government will not loosen its grip on the system. It's irrevocable, is how it's described in the Constitution. The first page of the Constitution says that the communist system is irrevocable, and individuals are to defend it with weapons if necessary, should it be threatened. So my heart breaks for those people, 66 years of trying to have a voice. And, you know, of course the regime says that it is a democracy. It says that also on the front page, the first page of the Constitution, that it's a democracy. And then just a few paragraphs down, it's irrevocable.
Yeah.
So single party, it's a single party state, and it's an irrevocable system, but it's a democracy.
Right. I guess in that case, you can call it whatever you want. Yeah.
There's a famous author. He's passed. His name is Reynaldo Arenas. Amazing Cuban writer. They made a movie of his memoir, Before Night Falls. And he has a saying that the communist system and the capitalist system both will kick you in the ass. The difference is that in the capitalist system, you can scream about it, but in the communist system, you have to stand up and applaud.
I think we can relate to that. And certainly with your book, Property of the Revolution, we can understand the part about standing up and applauding. The system.
As if you wanted it to happen to you.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's why I feel that Property of the Revolution is really such important, necessary reading to open our eyes, because otherwise there's just kind of this fogginess about it. Oh, yeah, that went on. But you really bring out the humanity, the people that experienced this. And as terrible as that was, it was still... that was your home. Actually, that's a part that is a question about feeling American or feeling Cuban American. What do you feel about that?
Do you mean what I feel I am?
Yes.
Yeah. I think a mix of both. I think the Cuban American is a good description of how I feel. But the funny thing is that I'm really neither completely Cuban nor completely American. I don't feel completely either one of those things because of what happened. When I go back, I've gone back to Cuba twice, and I speak fluent Spanish. Actually, I feel a kind of return to home feeling that I don't necessarily always feel when I come back. The United States is home too, but it's a return to your culture. So it feels really comfortable and homey to me in Cuba. It's like it's home in a way that the United States isn't.
Yes.
But I'm really not a regular American, and I'm really not a regular Cuban when I go to Cuba. I'm a mix of two things, and that is the identity, I think, of immigrants. And we can look completely American and settled and going to baseball games and going skiing and enjoying football, but inside there is a chunk of you that it doesn't feel like it fully belongs.
And probably because I too I'm not a refugee. I'm an immigrant, and I can feel the combination of being Canadian and being.
So you do you know what that feels like. It's even though you feel probably completely at home in the United States, but somehow.
But there's still this other piece. And yet I can be in Canada. I think I wonder about yourself with the way that Cuba is, that there's still those roots, so you feel that connection. But the fact that the country has been so mangled by the government.
Yes. I feel so lucky, Kate, that my parents did what they did. And I don't know that I would have had the guts to do what they did. Isn't it interesting how some people know when to leave or even have the courage to leave and others don't?
Yes.
But they did. With my writing, especially my Cuba Curious Substack, which comes out every Thursday, I am pretty much on top of what average Cubans are going through day by day. And it is horrific what they're going through. It's the worst economic crisis since the revolution, and that is saying a lot. All the basics are rationed out: electricity, water, food, medicine. And of course, in the United States, when you tell people about it, they say, oh, it's our brutal embargo that's causing that, but it's not. No average Cuban believes that it's the embargo that's causing this problem, all the problems. They know that it's a system that's enriched itself, a political party that's enriched itself, and won't change.
Yes, as you've described, how there are those who really are living in luxury. Wow.
They really are.
Yeah.
The system is messed up. I mean, the economic plans and the whole economy is messed up. It's a planned economy, number one, and they are trying to control everything, and they don't want anybody to be wealthy. You can't somehow have more than the other guy. However, if you're at the top of the military or the top of the political system, your people, your friends and family somehow are doing quite well. And they drive luxury cars. And this is one of the things that Cubans complain about all the time, because some of the Castro family's grandchildren have no concept of what average Cubans are going through, and they keep on going on social media and posting themselves driving fancy cars or going to a bar that has electricity when nothing else has electricity in Havana, because it's one of their bars. You need special permission to have any kind of business, and only a few are permitted. And what a coincidence that the ones that are allowed are somehow tied. If you follow the trail, it goes back to a member of the government. Somehow that family benefits. And Cubans know this. Cubans see in the middle of their blackouts that the luxury hotels are all lit up. And they know that they don't have electricity, but the hotels do. The tourism sector is for foreign tourists. Very few Cubans could afford those prices. And who's running tourism? Actually, it's the military's conglomerate, headquartered in Panama, Gaesa. And they run, it's estimated that they run 75% of the economy, including tourism. So in those hotels, there's food on buffet tables. There's all kinds of luxuries that no Cuban has even seen in years or had access to. And if they found it, how could they afford it? Anyway, because I'm so immersed in it and I write about it weekly, I'm overwhelmed with gratitude that my parents did what they did and got us out.
Yes. In turn, I have gratitude that you are the storyteller who listened to all those stories that the elders shared, and that you've written this so that we are able to get some insight. And now, as you mentioned, having your Substack, then that is a way for us to really, I appreciate knowing that, to really find out more and to know what is happening today.
Yes,
so
it is. I get comments like that from subscribers all the time. Like, why aren't we being told about some of this? And the press doesn't cover it. And it's an important country. It's a small country, but it's an important country because it has allies. It's allied with our enemies, Russia, China, Iran, and with dictatorships that it has helped sustained and trained in Venezuela and Nicaragua. I'm doing my bit, basically.
Yes,
I feel like I've done my bit.
Well, the book is really an important and an amazing read, Property of the Revolution. And of course, this we can find at any of our favorite book sources, correct?
Well, if they don't have it, the bookseller at the brick and mortar store can order it from Simon & Schuster, who's the distributor.
Great.
And you can also check with your library. It's available in all formats, print, audio, and ebook. The audio book, I really enjoyed recording that. I felt like the family was all inside this little tiny recording booth with me for a week. It was great. I didn't want to leave.
I bet. We should also mention your... Oh, you're welcome, Ana. And let's mention your website as well.
Yes, it's anacubana.com. So Ana with one N, A-N-A, Cubana, CUBANA.com. That's another place that a listener could go to see where they can get the book, because there are different buy buttons on the homepage.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And where we can listen to some of the NPR audio that you have there.
Yes.
Right. And the Substack.
Yes, you can. All of that is there. That's a good place to go.
Well, all too quickly, time evaporates on us when there's so much to share. I just can't say enough how I just appreciate how you are such a wonderful storyteller. And not only that, but to share such an important part of history. And it's your history, but I think it ties into all of us, and we can find ways that we really relate and connect to it. So I really appreciate who you are.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome, Anna. It's really been wonderful to connect with you.
It's been a pleasure, a total pleasure and privilege. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you for being here this morning to meet these wonderful guests who've shared parts of their lives with us and which I trust will help us gain deeper understanding. Please check the station's website for the podcast for more information about these guests, and please share the stories with your family and friends. I'm Kate Daniels, and if you'd like to connect with me, simply send me an email, katedaniels@hubbardradio.com. Have a great and safe summer celebration.
Thank you for listening to Inspirational Women. Tune in every Sunday morning at this time to hear about those truly empowering the Northwest community, all for the greater good. Sunday Morning Magazine and Inspirational Women are a public service of Hubbard Radio Seattle.